In 2008, I wrote a book, Arkitekturang Filipino. The book traces the history of Philippine-built forms from its primeval origins to its contemporary forms. This book inspired the film you're about to see, which was produced in 2016 with the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Spanish colonialism had changed the face of Philippine-built environment forever. Spanish colonial authorities instituted control and order in the colonial domain. Among the new building types include churches, fortresses, bahay na bato, aksesorya, teatro, and the fabrica, among others. These new building types were crafted in pursuit of a new colonial lifestyle.
With cross and sword, Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, in 1565, took possession of Philippine Islands in the name of the Spanish crown. Initially, Legazpi founded settlements in Cebu and Panay, but moved northward to Luzon. The goal was to conquer the fabled Muslim settlement of Manila because of its strategic position. In 1571, the Spaniards successfully occupied the charred remains of the settlement abandoned by Raja Sulaiman, chieftain of Manila. In time, the settlement of light materials gave way to a stone-fortified metropolis. A Spanish-walled city, Intramuros, was taking shape within less than a mile in area, spreading out from the point of a triangle, bordered by the bay and the river. The devastation caused by the 1583 fire and the 1645 earthquake resulted in the invention of a hybrid type of construction, the Arquitectura Mestiza, which combined wooden frames and stone. This flexible construction, which used wood in the upper floor and stone in the lower floor, had a better chance of surviving an earthquake. While Intramuros was being built and reconstructed, the Spaniards ventured inland. To accomplish the territorial and spiritual takeover, the colonial space was redesigned according to an urbanizing program known as Reducción. The small, scattered clusters of native settlements were forced to consolidate into single, larger, and compact villages to easily manage every affair of the native populace. These new towns followed the urban master plan prescribed by the 1573 Royal Ordinance of King Philip II, known as the Laws of the Indies. It decreed that the town plan should establish a main plaza or Plaza Mayor. Around the huge and open square of the plaza was a complex of prominent buildings of colonial governance: the church and convent, the Casa Real or town hall, the tribunal, the official residence, and other important government buildings. The marketplace and residences of various social classes were also distributed hierarchically around this complex. The colonial condition bred a new kind of lifestyle and activities which characterized the emerging urban life. The Spanish building program was driven by the aesthetics of monumentality. Thus, Spanish colonial architecture was built of sturdier and more permanent materials using imported methods of construction. Many churches and other institutional structures were built under the direction of architects or maestro de obras or master builders, many of whom were priests. Builders, largely Chinese, were often employed under a contractual system called pakyao. The colonial government also used the tax system of polo y servicio, which generally compelled every able-bodied male to render labor service for public construction to sustain the building activities. The building of garrisons, naval constructions, and fortresses was a military strategy to safeguard the colonial territories. Intramuros was the foremost fortification built by the Spanish crown. The religious orders undertook the spiritual governance of the Filipinos and initiated the building of ecclesiastical edifices, churches, belfry, monasteries, and convents. In newly founded parishes, the church occupied the most prominent site of a town and functioned as a site of evangelical mission in the area. The earliest churches were rendered in the vernacular idiom, simple in plan and fashioned of light materials with a high-pitched roof. Inside, the floor was either raised or of compacted earth, defining a rectangular nave. These structures were later expanded and made of adobe stone, coralline limestone, or brick, and were reinforced with buttresses to ensure their strength during earthquakes. Ultimately, the churches evolved into monumental stone sanctuaries that allowed indigenous motifs to coexist with European styles. The Chinese and native artisans interpreted and executed the ornaments from classical, Romanesque, Gothic, Baroque, Rococo, and Mudéjar sources, not strictly according to formal rules of the style, but on their own aesthetic discretion, often in simplified form and incorporated with local tropical motifs and Chinese decorative elements, which exemplifies the tendency of colonial ornamentation towards horror-vacui. The whole external composition was lorded over by one or two bell towers, or campanario, ranging from 3 to 5 stories. The towers attached to the church were usually provided with a baptistry at the ground floor. Adjacent to the church was a parish house called convento. It served as lodging house for visiting dignitaries, storerooms for food and armaments, school, office, and parish archives. Another component of the church complex was the graveyard, or Campo Santo. From the 17th and 19th century, a new domestic prototype sprung from 2 centuries of development. The Bahay na Bato, descended from the Bahay Kubo and resembled the Arquitectura Mestiza in the 17th century. These houses were typically 2 stories, with the ground story made of massive cut stone or brick walls, and the upper story level built of hardwood. The house was capped by a hip or gabled tiled roof with a steep slope. By the last quarter of the 19th century, Manila experienced an urban sprawl. Urbanization spilled over the old walls into the various arrabales or nearby suburbs. The accessoria, or apartment dwellings, were another consequence of industrialization that grew from the migrant laborers' need for cheap housing in commercial and industrial areas. Civic architecture, such as the Palacio Real, the Ayuntamiento, and the Aduana, epitomized the Spanish administrative institutions. The Casa del Ayuntamiento occupied an entire block on one of the sides of the Plaza Mayor of Manila. Across the Ayuntamiento was the residence of the highest official of the land, the Palacio del Gobernador General, or Palacio Real. 2 types of school buildings surfaced during the Spanish colonial period: the Colegio, or Universidad, found in urban areas, and the Escuela Primaria, found in different pueblos. These institutions had the privilege of having spacious buildings and broad courtyards, with a chapel at the center. Apart from these, the religious orders also took charge of the health and medical needs of the colonial subjects. Franciscans built the first hospital around 1564, the Hospital Real, which was also one of the first buildings to be erected in Manila. Colonial infrastructure and public works raised the living standards of its subject, and also dependent upon port and harbor facilities to integrate the colony with the routes of global commerce. Commercial buildings during the Spanish colonial era varied from small sidewalk stalls to huge factories. In 1809, European commercial houses were allowed to operate in Manila, and the influx of foreign commercial firms followed suit. Expatriates launched their businesses on Escolta and adjacent streets. The early trading houses and commercial firms retrofitted the Bahay na Bato. Here, the ground floor was occupied by offices and shops, while the upper story functioned as the residence of the proprietor of the company. The colonial amusement and public diversions were few and often dominated by theater and cockfighting. Teatro de Binondo and Teatro Circo Zorilla were designed specifically for theatrical dance and musical performances. The persistence of cockfighting led to the regulation of the game and building of cockfighting arenas or sabungan. Illegitimate forms of leisure also persisted in the urban precincts, especially in the commercial district of Binondo, where functional spaces for gambling, prostitution, and opium consumption were housed. Lasting for 333 years, the Spanish colonial rule came to an abrupt end at the turn of the 19th century.